All right, we're live now. Right, Bulla, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today and for taking the time to be a part of this discussion. We're very pleased to have you with us as we discuss a topic that continues to grow in importance for organizations of all sizes, and that is cyber resilience and how businesses can better protect and recover their data in today's environment. We're also very delighted to be joined by a special guest today, Mr. Ron Pher from Veeam. Ron is a senior systems engineer and a pre-sales consultant. He brings with him a deep technical expertise and practical experience when it comes to modern data protection, and we're really grateful to have him share his insights with us. So, Bulla, Ron, how are you doing?
Good, thanks, mate. Thanks again, everyone, for joining. I've been working in the Fiji market for a long time now, and I pretty much know quite a few of you. It's good to see some familiar names in the list, and yeah, looking forward to helping wherever I can.
Ron? Right, so throughout this session, we're going to explore what modern data protection really looks like, why it is critical for PG businesses, and how Veeam and with how Vodafone and Veeam can help support these organizations locally and to stay resilient, especially with recovery when it matters most. So quickly get into it. So basically what we're going to cover in this webinar is we'll start looking at why data protection matters now more than ever. Then we'll outline what a modern data protection really looks like. And then from there, we'll show you how Veeam delivers on these capabilities. That includes a live demo before wrapping it up with how we here at Vodafone can support you locally. And then we'll end the webinar with a round of Q&A, as we always do. So if you have any questions throughout this entire presentation, the Q&A at the end will be your chance to fire away with those questions and we'll answer them the best we can. Right. So why data protection matters today? Um, Before we jump into the solutions, it's really important to understand why data protection has become so critical, especially for organizations in this day and age. First and foremost, cyber attacks. Cyber attacks, as you all know, are rising sharply. Modern ransomware doesn't just target large enterprises anymore, it goes after businesses of all sizes. Because attackers know that data is mission critical. And if systems are encrypted or if they're locked, entire operations stop. And you feel that pressure to pay off the attackers so you can get access back to your systems. But aside from cyber attacks, human error. Okay, that's another major cause of data loss, whether it's accidental deletions, overwriting files, or misconfigurations. These things happen every day. These are not malicious attacks by any means. They're normal mistakes. They're normal but very costly. And if you don't have a reliable recovery option, they can be just as disruptive as a cyber attack. Now, apart from that, we have systems and hardware. These can fail unexpectedly, as I'm sure a lot of you may have experienced. Server crashes, storage fails, power issues. Even the most well-maintained environments can still experience outages. And when that happens, the business impact is immediate if your data can't be recovered quickly. Now, all of this leads to one big challenge, and that is downtime. Downtime is costly. When systems are unavailable, employees can't work, customers are affected, and revenue is lost. So even short outages can damage customer trust and brand reputation. But on top of that, many organizations have compliance and regulatory requirements. So they're expected to retain data securely and be able to recover it when it's required. So whether it's for audits, investigations, legal purposes, what have you, losing data or being unable to restore it, these can have very serious consequences. And ultimately, business continuity. This depends on how quickly data can be recovered. It's no longer enough just to have backups in place. Organizations need the confidence that they can restore systems and data quickly so that operations can continue during an incident. And that's why data protection is no longer optional. It is a critical part of keeping businesses running. Now, what modern data protection really means. So, given today's cyber risks, human error, costly downtime, traditional backups no longer cutting it, businesses now need faster recovery, stronger ransomware protection, and better visibility. This is what modern protection is essentially all about. So when we talk about modern data protection, we're really talking about a shift in expectations. So first and foremost, fast recovery is essential. Businesses no longer measure success by whether backups exist. As I stated before, they measure it by how quickly systems and data can be restored. So recovery expectations have shifted from hours to days and now minutes, right? Because every minute of downtime has a real business impact. The next is ransomware resilience. Sorry, it's coverage across hybrid and cloud environments. So data no longer lives in one place. It sits on premise, in private as well as public clouds and across software as a service platforms. Modern data protection must work seamlessly across all of these environments, without gaps or separate tools. And then, of course, ransomware resilience. This is no longer optional, especially today. It's mandatory. Modern ransomware doesn't just encrypt production systems, it actively targets your backups as well. That means the backups themselves must be protected from tampering, deletion, encryption. Otherwise, the recovery of that data is just completely not possible. Automation, this also plays another critical role. Manual processes increase risk, whether it's missed backups, failed jobs, or systems that were never tested. Automation scheduling, monitoring, and recovery testing. These help reduce human error and ensure protection, and it's consistent and reliable throughout. Then, of course, scalability. That's another expectation. As your businesses grow, you'll tend to add new systems or move workloads to the cloud. The data protection strategy needs to grow with them, without requiring a complete redesign every time. And then finally, we have centralized visibility. So your IT teams need a single platform, where they can see what's being protected, what's not being protected, and how quickly data can be recovered. So without that visibility, organizations often blind themselves, and they're blind to the risks until it's too late. So taken together, modern data protection is really just about speed, security, automation, and visibility. All of that, working together to ensure that the business can recover quickly no matter what happens. Right? So these requirements set a very high bar for what data protection is today. But to see how these can be delivered in practice, I will now hand you over to Ron, who will take us through it. Over to you, Ron.
Awesome. Thanks for that. So, what I thought we'd do today is obviously talk about, not just talk about modern data protection, but also talk about how Veeam is also trying to keep up with things, right? So, most of a lot of organizations in Fiji already use Veeam, which is a great first step. But a lot of customers I find they're not keeping up with everything Veeam delivers now. A lot of organizations I've seen implemented Veeam probably, more than 5 years ago, and they have not been the maturity of that data protection environment has not been kept up, right? And that becomes a high risk scenario because the threats are obviously keeping up the pace. and the attacks, obviously based on what you see on the screen, it's not getting any better from an attack perspective. But what modern data protection means to me personally is Veeam needs to do two things. One is keep up with you. So your environment changes, your data is no longer all in one place, for example. So keeping up with you and how you change as a business. And secondly, keeping up with the threats. So that's essentially what I feel like a modern solution has to do, right? Keep up with time. Um, One of the things that we really have to adapt to in this day and age is have an immutable or air-gapped backup as one of the copies. It's no longer, I would say, it's no longer a nice to have, but almost every single month I hear um, you know, Veeam customers themselves getting compromised because we are not there to prevent these things from happening, but we are there to help you recover from it, right? So having a immutable backup is no, is kind of a must these days. How you can get immutability, there are various different ways. And if I actually go back, have a look at the left-hand side of this is around infrastructure complexity. You can also implement immutability in a very complex way. But what you really want to do is simplify things so that when the time comes, there's not any issues with recovery. So the best practices for ransomware protection 100% needs to be updated to this new best practice, which is that having three copies of your data, multiple, different media, one offsite for sure, and definitely one immutable copy. Now, those zero errors there right at the end, that's also something that gets neglected quite often, and that's customers not testing their recoverability. Only when something goes wrong is when they look into how do they recover their data. So imagine if every month your teams picked a random scenario that, hey, let's just say our application XYZ um, is corrupted or has been deleted or has been compromised. What are the steps that you're going to take or your team is going to take to actually get that back? And one thing I'll show when we get to the demo side of things is there's quite a lot of options, so you need to practice beforehand. Another thing I'll mention is Veeam is part of a larger, ecosystem. So there you obviously would be aligned to different security vendors as well. Look at how you can work and integrate Veeam with your overall ecosystem and make it part of, your multi-layer approach to security. So that's another thing that gets neglected is, Veeam is obviously got a lot of reporting and alerting, but that may not be necessarily be going to your security solution or your SIEM solution, etc. When we say keeping up with your workloads, this is basically a view to give you some idea of how we're doing that. So obviously, we're still very strong with VMware Hyper-V environments, and over the years, we've added a lot more hypervisors to that mix. But that is continuing to grow because of the demand from our customer base, for example, right? So you can see some of the ones that I mentioned there, and it'll not stop as long as your environments are changing. Customers globally will have to adapt. Secondly, if you focus on SaaS, so we only came into the SaaS side of things maybe a couple of years ago, but that has been probably the most aggressive roadmap that we've got, where we are trying to get everything that customers can do from a self-managed perspective into a solution where they can consume it as SaaS. And you can see some of the solutions that we can do there from 365, Entra, Salesforce, for example, and Azure, AWS. As you start getting into that space, you know that you've got multiple ways that you can protect it, right? Um, so speaking of modernizing, it was version 13 of our solution, our data platform, that came up with now a software appliance. Now, the reason we've actually done this is, again, to help customers with some of these challenges. Veeam itself is a big target for ransomware in a ransomware situation because obviously they compromise Veeam, and that increases their chances of getting money out of you. So if Veeam is not updated in your environment, it's easier for them to compromise it. So one of the things that we're doing is we've already released this software appliance, which is pre-built, pre-hardened, appliance. You can deploy it in a virtual environment. You can deploy it in a physical environment. That's an option to you. But we are also trying to lock that down so that it is protected from cyber threats, right? So it's secure by design. Things like zero trust, things like automatic patching. Now, if we can handle the patching for you on these appliances, it means that that's one less thing that you may not get a chance to do before it gets compromised, right? So this is available today. If you're already a Veeam customer, you're probably running Veeam on Windows. How this is built is this is a fully Linux-based appliance, right? And so um, for you to move from your Windows-based to this Linux hardened appliance is not as easy as in-place upgrade. So while we won't cover that in this session right now, there is something to keep in mind is when you're looking at upgrading your platform, is to think about, hey, this is actually the better way of doing things because we'll get to a stage where um, it is secure and protected, right? Uh, So in summary, when it comes to that appliance itself, it's easier to deploy, which means that if you have new environments coming up or you're migrating between hypervisors or data centers, for example, it's very easy for you to deploy these appliances. From a technical perspective, there's obviously the appliance itself, and then there's the repository. Something I'll mention is we've also released a um, ISO for a better word, or an appliance for immutability. It's a software appliance, obviously, so it needs to be deployed where there's some storage. But again, customers had lots of challenges working out how to achieve immutability in the environment, so we've simplified that as well. From a deployment perspective. So if you are looking to try this, it is available right now from our downloads page, and you can either, like I said, do it as an ISO or as a OVF, where you can just import that back into your VMware environment. With that, that's all I had in terms of giving you a very quick introduction to how we're changing, how we're keeping up in terms of trying to keep up with your workloads, trying to keep up with the threats, for example. What I thought we'll do next is take you into the demo environment and show you some of these things in practice. Some of these things you may already have. So it's not necessarily about new products or licenses, for example. It's more about getting you view into some of the things that you may not be using. So you've got it today, but you may not be using, right? Just to get a confirmation, you can see my demo environment.
Yep, I can see a demo environment run.
Perfect. Thank you. So, like I mentioned, so this is version 13 that we're running. So while version 13 is an appliance, you can still have a Windows client. So this could be sitting on your desktop, for example, that you can connect to this client and still have your the experience that you used to. So it's not like you totally have to give that up. We are moving to what do you call a web-based UI as well. So as you can see here, uh, quickly show you. This is our web-based UI going straight into that appliance. So this will also, enhance your security. So if you're not logging onto the remote desktop into onto that server all the time, even RDP services and stuff are a big risk factor when it comes to compromises, right? So you don't have to enable RDP, for example, for that particular environment. So as you can see here, this is backup and replication console. Uh, I'll quickly show you what I meant by automatic updates. So Veeam with these appliances, it is mandatory to do the updates, whether it's just the security ones or product updates. And you can have some flexibility. You can choose when to schedule it. You can choose to get it from Veeam directly or have a mirrored repository if you're very big in terms of your multi-site environments, for example. But yeah, in short, going into this architecture that gives you the ability to secure that, out of the box, for example. Um, in version 13, some of these things are not new to version 13, but I thought I'd mention. Now, out of the box, there is security and compliance analyzer. What this does is, historically, when we're looking at securing an application, there'd usually be a best practices guide on how to secure an application, right? So whether that's to do with permissions, whether that's to do with ports or password or multi-factor, all of those things. It used to be a manual way of analyzing that and going and making those changes. So as you can see here, from everything from checking for permissions, ports, configuration. Are you practicing the 3-2-1 backup rule, for example? Are you doing encryption? Do you have immutability? All of those things. This can actually run every day, so you can schedule this and get alerts if you've got significant changes that you're not aware of. Obviously, if there's something that is not applicable to you and you don't want to get alerts for it, for example, then you can right click and suppress that, or you can suppress that from here. So, for example, it's not applicable to you, right? So that's the security and compliance analyzer. That's to help you. The other thing I thought we'd quickly talk about is while we are not necessarily, all things security, that you can kind of be, kind of expect that there's malware in your backups because malware obviously, brings themselves up to light quite later on. They already maybe in your backups. So one of the things that we can do is we can use the historical data that we've backed up and scan with the latest signatures to say, hey, just the FYI, on our monthly scan, we can detect that there's a threat that's, dormant in your backups. What does that mean from a backup perspective? Obviously, if it's immutable, then it's not like you can go and just remove that. But once, if you know that, as part of your recovery practice strategies, or in recovery when it comes to a proper disaster recovery scenario, you know that you need to probably do a secure restore. What a secure restore is you restoring without promoting it to production, getting the opportunity to go clean that malware up before you actually get network connectivity and all of those things sorted, right? So that you don't restore the malware as is and then get into the same situation again and again. So there's two options here. You can see Veeam Threat Hunter. So this is something that means that Veeam itself is pushing out signatures, for example, for you for this particular application to use to scan for malware. So we acquired a cyber incident response company 2 years ago, and we have a database of everything that they discover out in the world, and we are using that to push to clients so that they could leverage that. Obviously, you've got the ability to integrate your own AV, for example, right? The other thing I'll quickly mention is encryption detection. So when we are backing up or replicating, we have an opportunity to understand the levels of encryption in your production data. So imagine we do a baseline of your application, and we know that there is some encrypted data there, which is fine because you do want to encrypt some data at the source. But over time, we see a spike in the encryption level when we are backing up that same application. So you want things like that to warn you, for example, and that's something that the solution can do, right? What does that look like? In here you can see there would be alerts and stuff as well, but then you can see this particular one has been flagged to have actual malware. And then you've got obviously the ability to come in and scan with the latest engine, with the RO rules and all of those things that your security vendor can help you with, right? To identify and start the cleanup process, for example. Um, those are the two areas that I wanted to talk about, for example, when it comes to security per se. The When we talk about workload coverage, to make things easier, you can see here I've got multiple different environments, whether that's Nutanix, whether that's VMware, whether that's Hyper-V, and very soon, while this is in not in production right now, not available to the public, we're supporting more hypervisors, right? So as you can see, that's the HPE's VM Essentials backup over there. Um, and the ability to recover without having dependency on your source. So what do I mean by that? Let's just say you've got a VMware environment today, and you get compromised, and you cannot, and your whole VMware itself has been compromised, where rebuilding that, you've decided, you know what, I'm just going to move to Hyper-V uh, through this process, right? So even though you've got a VMware backup, you want to move to Hyper-V. So the ability to use Veeam actually to come in here and say, I would like to recover this VMware VM domain controller, for example, as a Hyper-V VM, that gives you such high flexibility when it comes to recovering in a disaster situation. Because at that point in time, you're not thinking about doing things slowly. You're thinking about how do I quickly get my environment up and running again, right? So that's something that I wanted to cover off, is the ability for you to not be dependent on your source to recover is a big thing. Um, the When it comes to public cloud, or uh, for example, DR as a service, um, customers are no longer, there are lots of customers who cannot justify having a dedicated DR site. So they are looking at options to partner with either the public cloud providers, or in your case, you've got a very good option of partnering with Vodafone, because they've got the data center services, they've got the expertise to provide you as for a DR site, right? So those sorts of things become quite valid, but you know that when you're protecting your environment with Veeam, that portability, that ability to restore anywhere you'd like becomes a very key thing, right? Next, I wanted to very quickly talk just a little bit about how we helping customers just from an immutability perspective, if they cannot achieve immutability quickly enough. So what I mean by that is, for example, you may already have invested in Veeam and have a Veeam repository, but you still got a couple of years left before that, net needs to be refreshed. That may be a Windows repository. That may be, just a NAS, for example. Um, we just recently provided a Veeam Vault service. Now, Veeam Vault service is in Azure, so it's not local in Fiji. But that may or may not be a bad thing, because you could have an immutable secure copy of your backup in Vault. Why we did that was for customers so that they could get immutability, tick that box, and have a copy that's immutable, even though they can't do a full hardware refresh to get immutability on-prem, right? So there are various different ways of doing immutability. I'm not here to recommend Vault. I'm just saying for a Fiji business, for example, we are starting to see customers not able to adapt immutability quickly enough. I know I'm working with Vodafone, for example, right now to see how we can provide an immutable repository in country, so that you as a customer, if you needed, for example, 10 terabytes and you don't want this to go to Veeam Azure Vault, you want to go to Vodafone, that should be as easy as, right click, add repository, object storage, plug that in, and away you go. Right. So that is something that we are working on right now. But for in the interim, having a copy in Vault, even if it is for 7 days, 14 days, and that's it, gives you the ability to leverage that. So imagine your whole environment, including Veeam, gets compromised, right? You install a fresh copy of Veeam. You right click, come into the backup repository, you right click, add this, add Vault, for example. Adding Vault is literally, username and password, because we already know, what's in there, all the metadata and everything is intact. Then you'd come in and obviously, instead of disk, you'd go into your object storage and start to see all the different backups that you've got available uh, on Vault. Excuse me. As you can see here, I've got a couple of backups here. And then whether you do them individually or you do them, what do you call, in bulk? Sorry, just having some VPN issues. So, so you can see here, I've got something that's sitting in a secure vault, immutable, for example. I can then restore that back to original location, whether that's VMware, Hyper-V, Nutanix. I can do file folder recovery. I can move things around. But what's more important is this copy of the backup is immutable. They cannot be modified, they cannot be deleted, so you've got that secure copy. Immutability obviously has a time flag, so we don't want to make things immutable forever, but at least having the latest backups or short-term immutability gives you that reassurance that if you lost everything, you can recover from that perspective. Um, Moving on, just very quickly, since we're talking about demos, is the adoption of Veeam SaaS, right? So we talked about how we are on this journey to provide customers with as many SaaS options as possible for what is already available in the self-managed version. So you know that Veeam backup for M365 already exists, Veeam backup for Azure, Veeam backup for Salesforce. All of these exist if you need it to be within your domain onto your storage. But because some of these solutions are cloud based service, you might just want to keep things in the cloud, right? So M365 backup going to Veeam Data Cloud, same for Salesforce, same for Azure, for example. But as you can see, this is growing, and I showed you earlier in the presentation some of the roadmap that we are bringing out, right? So while I won't go into too much detail here from a demo perspective, but as you organizations in Fiji are already adopting M365. It, it was already mentioned in this session quite early on that having a SaaS-based solution does not negate the need for data protection, right? So the SaaS vendors are obviously responsible for the service itself, but they're not responsible for your data. So having a copy of your M365, whether that's SharePoint, whether that's OneDrive, emails, all of those things that you already were doing when you had on-prem versions of those applications, you'll need to continue doing when you have got SaaS versions of those applications. So the good thing there is, if you're already familiar with Veeam, the recoverability options, all of that, still remains. So you can still come and restore individual items, still come and restore mailboxes. Lots of customers have an issue where, they need to keep backups for people who even after they leave the organization. But, this gives us an option of coming and restoring that person's mailbox or items, whether you want to restore it back to original location, whether you want to put it, into a different mailbox because maybe this user doesn't exist anymore, or you want to download a copy, whether there's a PSD or attachments, basically. You can quite easily do that. And I won't go into the details, but you can see Outlook, OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams, and this is growing. Entra ID is something that also needs attention because unlike on-prem Active Directory where you got protection with Veeam using the image-based tool, there is no default protection when it comes to Entra ID in the cloud. But if you're using M365, you're 100% using Entra ID, right? And there are lots and lots of things that while you may sync between on-prem and Entra, there's lots of things that don't get sync back to on-prem because it doesn't make sense for that to happen, right? So things like conditional access policies, things like enterprise apps, all of those things you can see here, some of the things that we protect. But these need protection so that you can then go and restore, whether that's individual users or whole groups or Intune policies, all of those things. So you've got the ability to do that. So this is something that is in Veeam Data Cloud. I will stop there. From a demo perspective, I'll hand it back to you. And then if we have any questions, we've obviously got the ability to come back to the demo environment as required.
Great. Thanks, Ron. So what I will do now is I'll quickly go over what we here at Vodafone Fiji do as a managed service provider. You just wait for these slides to load back up. Got it. Right. So as a managed service provider, we here at Vodafone Fiji, beyond the technology itself, a critical part of any data protection solution is the support that's behind it. And this is where we really do add value to it. So we provide local expertise to design, deploy, and configure the solution correctly from the start. So it ensures that it's all aligned with your environment as well as your requirements. Our approach itself is tailored specifically towards Fiji's business landscape, taking into account local infrastructure realities, connectivity considerations, as well as your compliance needs. And the support is also provided locally, obviously, and in the same time zone, which means, faster response, you get quicker recovery when issues arise, especially during critical incidents. We also offer a flexible deployment model, whether it's going to be on-prem, on cloud, a hybrid-based solution, so that you, the customer, can protect your data in the best way that suits your business. Okay. And of course, for organizations that prefer having a hands-off approach, we can manage the backup environment from end to end, from scheduling to monitoring to testing and reporting. We cover that as well. And of course, finally, because the solution is integrated into a broader ICT portfolio here at Vodafone, you, the customer, can benefit from having one local provider covering connectivity, cloud, security, and disaster recovery, all of this working together. So I think a fun way of thinking about this, right, is that Veeam, if for those of you who follow Formula One, Veeam is Ferrari. They build the liveries, they've built the technology to help your organizations stay secure. You, the customer, you're Lewis Hamilton. You're the drivers. You're the one powering this entire powering the entire solution. And we here at Vodafone, we are the pit crew. We're the ones changing the tires after every round. And we're keeping you in the race. So that's a fun way to think about it. Right. So if this interests you, if you would like to keep the conversation going after this webinar, you can reach out to us at corporate.ict@vodafone.com.fj. Again, that's corporate.ict@vodafone.com.fj. So looking forward to any of you who would want to continue the conversation after the conclusion of this webinar. Now comes the time for everybody's favorite bit, and that is the Q&A session. So I'm sure throughout the course of this presentation, a lot of you might have had burning questions that you're wanting to ask Ron and I. So if you have any questions, I'm sure you can see the Q&A section on your menu at the top of your screen. So if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the Q&A section and we will answer them accordingly. Thank you. All right, does anyone have any questions?
Doesn't look like it. What I'll do is I will also we have a question. What is the licensing model? Yeah, cool. I can take that question. Essentially, when it comes to the on-prem solution, it is licensed by a number of instances. So imagine VMs being instance, physical servers or agents being instance, for example. It is an annual subscription. When it comes to the cloud and SaaS solution, for example, M365, that is licensed by the number of licensed users. So imagine if you've got 200 M365 licenses, then you would license 200 VDC for M365 as well. Why is that different? Because we're obviously aligning to how the production environment is licensed, and also when it comes to M365, but in particular, um, when you license a user in M365, so with Microsoft, that's when the APIs are available for us as a backup vendor to start backing that data up. So that's why it's aligned to that. We do have lots of queries around storage. So imagine the VDC for M365 solution that's got built-in unlimited storage capability. So you don't pay for the storage, you still only pay for the per user license, for example. Another thing I can mention around that is you don't have to license everybody. There are some tools out there that you have to license all the users to use their solution. In our case, if you've got 200 users and you only want to provide data protection for the 50 execs or legal or HR, users, you can limit that to 50 if you needed to, for example. Um, that's a quick intro into what the different licensing models exist. Um, if you are a managed service customer with Vodafone, what I mean by that is if Vodafone looks after your data protection, for example, then you've got the ability to procure that under a monthly managed service. So that's obviously a contract between yourself and Vodafone. The key difference being you can consume Veeam as part of that service on a monthly basis, but another key information there is they become your support for all things Veeam related from that service perspective. So there's a difference between that and a customer owning their license and having that support contract with Veeam. Any other questions? I've just pasted my email address in there as well in case there's anything after the call that you needed some guidance on. We obviously between the two of us, we should be able to help you.
Does anyone have any other questions? Okay, we've got another one. Is there freeware on this to try the trial version?
Yes, yes, 100%. So all of our solutions do come with a 30-day trial, except for the SaaS versions. The SaaS versions are not what do you call doesn't have the same 30-day trial capability that the self-managed versions happen. But through the process of doing POCs, etc., we can enable customers to have a test environment for like 14 days for the VDC for M365 solution, for example. But for the self-managed stuff, yes, 100%. For example, version 13, if you wanted to give version 13 a go, you can download it and use a 30-day trial. Freeware, 100%. So, for example, there's a 10 instance, I think, of Veeam Free Edition. It's called the Community Edition. You can even use that to back up your laptops and desktops, for example. You can do servers as well. However, the free edition does not have what we call application aware processing. When you're backing up Active Directory or when you're backing up SQL, you ideally want to be backing it up in a way that it is application consistent. So you want to do a clean backup, right? So that is in the paid agent or the paid product. But the community edition will work. If you do back it up, it's just going to be in a crash consistent state, and you can still restore it. So it's not like restoring is an issue. Good question. Great question.
Awesome. Anyone have any other questions? It's the final call for questions today. If there's no further questions, we'll wrap this up.
So the Formula One race is over.
Yeah, looks like it.
What is the limitations when coming to security phase of the free edition? Yeah, so another really good question. There aren't that many security integrations on the free edition. You can still do immutability. It's not like things like immutability, things like encryption, all of those things are there. But what you can't do is things like the threat hunter. That's in the, like, for example, the paid edition. The security and analyzer, all of that is there. Um, can you do syslog? Can you do that? Yes, all of those things are there. So there are some limitations, but you can, from an underlying security perspective, you still get a lot in the free edition. The free edition does not have replication. The free edition is backup only. Now, what do I mean by replication? So a lot of messaging out there talks about backup being replicated, right? For us, when we say backup and replication, we actually mean VM to VM replication. So having a shutdown VM in your DR site or target host or anything like that, that's what we call replication. So that is not in the free edition. There's one more thing I think I can uh, share with you that will add a lot of value actually. There is something called Veeam Hands-on Lab. Now, I only got reminded of this because I know Stephen Hickey, who used to work for Veeam, is on the call right now, and he used to do a lot of these hands-on lab um, with me for our customers. So, for example, let me show you very quickly what this looks like. If you wanted to give Veeam, if you wanted to try Veeam, uh, this is a online environment. So as you can see, I'll paste the link here. It's called go.veeam.com hands-on lab. You wanted to test drive the version 13 appliance, right? You can request this lab, and for a couple of hours, you'll get an environment where you can have a guided approach to testing version 13. Same thing when it comes to, immutability, Entra ID. So this is another way, instead of trialing and downloading the software, you can actually test drive a lot of this capability. Orchestration with DR. So I'll paste this link, but it's a great way of getting hands-on experience with Veeam without having to have an environment of your or a test environment of your own. I've just pasted the link to that for your benefit.
We've got one last question here. It's would you recommend this to organizations that are overseas managed, for instance, NGOs and diplomatic corporations, or is this mainly for business?
Oh no, it's for any organization that's consuming data, right? Or wants to protect their data. I mean, you could sometimes say that it's even more important for organizations that hold personal data to protect that from accidental deletion, everything from accidental deletion to even ransomware threats, right? If you want to recover that data in an event of a disaster doesn't have to be natural disaster or full-on ransomware scenario. Disaster is simply, you've got a SharePoint site. and somebody's gone in there, made some changes, and now it looks different. You want to restore the SharePoint site to what it looked like yesterday. How do you do that quickly? Even for an NGO, that is a big thing. Same thing with your file shares and in emails. If I say I can't find emails that I know used to be in my mailbox, and I contact my help desk and say there are lots of emails that are missing, without knowing which emails I want them to restore, it becomes a really painful exercise. But the help desk, if they're using Veeam, will be able to compare and restore what is missing quite easily. So having a data protection for an organization that person described, is 100% valid.
All right. So if no one has any further questions, I think we will wrap up this webinar.
Thank you, everybody, for joining in. Thank you, Vodafone, for organizing this. I'm really passionate about ensuring customers in Fiji are protected. If they're using Veeam, we're here to assist making sure their Veeam is up to date and to a point that they can recover. I can never stress enough about practicing. I would love to hear customers doing ransomware recovery exercises, you know, just as part of their normal standard procedure, even if it's every 3 months. Go these days with AI, you can easily create a test, scenario where you can give it to your team and say, hey, recover this application. Don't have to connect it to the network, but do it and prove that we are ready for anything like this. So I'm passionate about it. I'm here to help, and that's it from me.
Thanks, Ron. Also, a reminder to everyone, this webinar is being recorded and you can find it on the Vodafone Fiji YouTube page. It should be up by tomorrow or at the latest next week, Monday. So if there's anyone you know who missed out on today's webinar and would have liked to join in, they can go to the Vodafone Fiji YouTube page and watch the recording on that. All right. So thank you everyone for joining us today and for taking time to be a part of this session. We hope that this discussion has helped highlight, why modern data protection is so critical in what it looks like in practice. A big thank you as well to Mr. Ron Pher from Veeam for sharing his expertise and walking us through the solution. Vinaka, once again, Ron, for taking time out of your busy schedule today. And if you have any further questions, I'm sure you would have seen by now that Ron and I have left our contacts in the chat. Don't worry, the chat will still be up even after the webinar is finished. And if you haven't noted down the contacts yet, and you can reach out to us and we can have a more in-depth discussion about how Veeam can work for you. All right, so that's all we have for you today. Thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen. Vinaka level. Thank you for your time, and we will see you in the next one. Thank you, everyone.
Vinaka.